Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and this is your guide to the patrolling cat lady of Ulduar, Auriaya.
Some things are better left alone.
As you defeat Kolagarn, you enter the observation ring, a big circular room overlooking Yogg-Saron's prison and the main crossroads of Ulduar. From here, you can take hallways leading to the four keepers, as well as General Bezax and Yogg on the left. However, before you do that, you've got to tackle Auriaya and her Sanctum sentries, four leaping panthers that hit very hard if they're in proximity to each other. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so Auriaya is a one-phase fight. Here's a super quick shot of a raid comp that works. This is nothing fancy, 2 tanks, 5 healers is fine, no need to stress here. Okay, so let's get into Auriaya's main abilities. I want to mention again the Sanctum sentries. We'll talk about them at the end of this section, but on pull, they're a big issue and need to be handled. Okay, first, she casts Terrifying Screech. This is just an AoE fear for 5 seconds, dispellable, and hits everyone in range. You can fear ward this pretty easy. Second, Sentinel Blast. This is an AoE channeled ability that she'll cast right after she casts fear, so you need someone who's able to interrupt that fear or be cleansed and then interrupt her. It does a bunch of damage and increases shadow damage taken by 100%, as well as stacking up to 5. So yeah, interrupt this as soon as possible and keep blasting. Next up, Sonic Screech. This ability is very similar to Meteor Slash from Brutalis. It fires a cone of damage in front of her, and the damage is split amongst everyone that it's hit by. You can turn her toward the raid or stack your range in front of her, while your melee moves in front during the cast, whatever you want to do to soak it as a group. Finally, she casts Summon Swarming Guardians. This just summons a bunch of low HP panthers. These are all pretty easy, just AoE them down. Okay, just a couple more things going on. About 1 minute into the fight, a Feral Defender will spawn. This is a high HP mob that has a few abilities. First, it's got Feral Essence, which is stacked 9 times at the start, and each time it's killed, it loses a stack. Over time, this mob's damage will be quite low, but that's not really relevant because Auriaya should be dead pretty quick. Second, Feral Pounce. It'll jump onto a random target and stun them and do some damage. Third, Feral Rush. It'll charge someone and apply a bleed as well as interrupt casting. And finally, Seeping Feral Essence. When it dies, it leaves behind a void zone on the ground until it revives, consuming one of its lives. This does damage, so stay out of it. Okay, let's get into the walkthrough. The most difficult part of this fight is the pull. That's because of these guys, the Sanctum sentries. Each have an ability called Savage Pounce that will jump to their target and do a bunch of damage, as well as apply a bleed. This isn't so bad except for the other thing they have called Strength of the Pack. When they're in the presence of other Sanctum sentries, about 20 yards, they each get 50% more damage. So this leads to this Pounce and their melee swings doing an insane amount of damage because of this buff. To combat this, we do a few things. Now, there are many ways you could do this pull. This is just one way that mostly worked for us. I'm sure there's a better way, but this worked for us and it will work for you. We clear up the observation ring a bit to give us some room, and then the entire raid line of sights around a corner. Any corner will do, just make sure the entire raid is comfortably behind the wall. Then, a hunter will run up and trap in the path of where Auriaya and her panthers will walk into. Just before she arrives, the hunter casts Misdirect, and then she will trigger the trap. All the panthers and Auriaya will then have their threat redirected to the tank, where he'll be waiting behind a corner. Just before they arrive, the tank shield walls, he gets a pain sup, and any additional cooldowns are used to prevent the tank from dying. From here, the raid very quickly kills the Sanctum sentries. Do whatever you can to avoid the tank dying here. Once they're dead, you're honestly halfway to the kill. We have the range standing on top of the tank, while the melee stands behind the boss as usual. As soon as she casts Sonic Screech, the melee move in front and soaks, and then they return. Otherwise, you've got to deal with the fears. Have your priests fear ward your tank, shamans use tremors, whatever you've got to do to counter this. One strategy is having the priests fear ward themselves and then mass dispelling as soon as the fear goes out to get 10 more people out. It's a small optimization, but it does work. And remember, you need to interrupt the Sentinel Blast after the fear, so a warrior should Berserker Rage and interrupt it. A shaman can shock it, whatever, just get it done. Okay, 1 minute in, the Feral Defender will spawn. Your off tank should grab it and leave it in the stack with the group to get cleaved, and then when it's close to death, run it out so it doesn't drop the void zone in your group. Occasionally, people can get feared toward the void zone, so do your best to get it far enough away that that's not a problem. And then the little guys will spawn occasionally, so just AoE them down, no big deal. And really that's it for Auriaya. The pull is definitely the most dangerous part. Don't be afraid to battle res a bunch of people if you don't get it quite right, and keep doing the fight with less than a full deck. You'll be fine, it's not too hard of an encounter. Okay, some tank tips. Pop everything you've got on pull to survive the Sanctum Sentries. Auriaya and her Summoned Panthers later on don't hit very hard, so this is the only moment you'll really need those cooldowns. Also for the off tank, the Feral Defender can occasionally jump away from you. If it does and it's in danger of dying, warn your raid to stop cleaving or move the boss so it doesn't drop a void zone in a bad position. And some healer tips. Like the tanks, pop everything you've got to keep your tanks up on the pull. This is a spooky moment and you won't need your cooldowns later on. Also, the Sonic Screech is a lot of damage, but it shouldn't kill anyone so long as people are soaking properly. Just get some shields up, maybe a D-sack, and heal it up after. Nothing too fatal. Finally, some DPS tips. Like the other two roles, pop those cooldowns early and kill the Sanctum Sentries as soon as possible. Once the first one dies, their damage drops considerably, so blast and get them dead to help your healers and tanks. And don't forget about interrupting the Sentinel Blast. It will wipe your raid if you don't get the interrupt right, so do whatever you need to do to avoid the fear and kick it. And that's it for Auriaya. Once she's dead, you have unmitigated access to the Keepers of Ulduar and the rest of the instance. If you found this guide helpful, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps massively in growing the channel and keeps pushing me to make more of these. Also, I set up a Patreon. If you want to support me further, the link is down below. You could get featured here like these amazing people, get access to a Patreon-only channel in my Discord, or we could do monthly Warcraft log reviews to help you improve your play. Alright, that's it for me. See you in Ulduar.